All right, welcome to Civic Punks, and I am super excited to be here with Friso and Harry, two people that Julio connected me with about a month ago, and I've been really enjoying a lot of the work that they're doing, and had a chance to hang out with Harry at the Creative Bureaucracy Festival a couple of weeks ago. So excited to have you guys on and to talk about sort of the approach that you guys are taking to transforming public sector programming and services in the Netherlands specifically. So super keen to dive into that. But before we dive into that, I want to hear more about who you are and what brought you to this work in the first place. So Harry, why don't I start with you? What's your story?
What's my story? I'm Harry. I started to study public administration like 25 years ago. Don't tell anybody I studied that. But yeah, that was the field of study. And I started to work a little bit at municipalities, and then I went back to university to try to figure out action research. And we did that by helping the most vulnerable people. And we studied a lot of these families. And in the Netherlands, we had families who had literally 20 to 40 professional each year trying to help them, costing a whopping 100,000 euros a year. And all these families said, we are not being helped. And we tried to rack our brain around, and how can this be? And everybody's saying, yeah, it's too complex, and there's so many people involved. What we slowly but surely learned to understand is that bureaucracy, unfortunately, doesn't have any ears on its head. It just can't cope with the stories these people will tell you. So we basically left university. We thought, enough study done. Let's see if we can start helping these families. And we started to do that 15 years ago. And that evolved in an entire method in trying to beat bureaucracy with plans these families make for themselves, basically.
I mean, I already have a bunch of questions I've written down that I want to follow up with you just on that. But before we do that, Friso, how about you? What's your story?
Yeah, hi. Nice to be here, Dirk. Yeah, my name is Friso Landstra. I'm an action researcher at the Institute, a colleague of Harry. Before that, I've been working with the government, national government, on tackling all these kind of big questions from the Justice Department, like youth gangs and tackling child abuse. But I started my studies in aerospace engineering and just rocket science and airplanes. But eventually for me it was, I think, too static. So just trying to figure out complex questions for citizens is, I think, my passion. Actually restructuring our government that is meant, I like really find it interesting to see that our government and our social welfare system that is meant to help the most vulnerable people in the Netherlands, or in the world, you could say, but in the Netherlands in this case, is actually not able to do that for the most vulnerable people. Like, everybody's being helped except for the most vulnerable that need the system the most. And I find that absolutely difficult to cope with. So really glad I joined IPW I think 5 years ago. And not only helping citizens with individual problems, but we're also seeing now we have like deprived neighborhoods, like whole city towns that are getting stuck in the bureaucracy, trying to perform innovation, public innovation, and get the same no from the system that all these civilians get. So on a little larger scale, we're trying to beat bureaucracy on that side as well.
Okay, so something that you've both said that I want a definition for is action research. Like, what is action research?
There is many academic definitions of that.
Well, what's your definition? How would you?
Way we basically started to learn it. We were studying these families just from interviewing everybody around it, like the 40 professionals, the families. What we came to learn the moment we started helping these families, we learned there was a whole new world we didn't understand. We thought we were the best classical researchers in doing correct interviews and staying outside interests. Action research for us is you have to get involved and basically jump in the middle of all these interests, because otherwise you can't understand them. So you have to make a little bit of change or try to change the situation, and then you can really see how people react. And as a classical researcher, you would say, how would you react if this and this happened? And the answers that are given are never the right answers, especially not in systems with interest. People think they behave differently than they actually do.
Yeah, and to make it a little bit practical, what we like find out, it's so interesting, is that I had the same when I was working at the ministry, is that we would be making analysis of what was the problem, for example, in tackling criminal gangs. And then there would come up these symptoms of what would be the problem. There would sharing of information between organizations would be the problem, or the lack of direction from professionals would be the problem. But in the 5 years we were helping these programs, they actually didn't improve. And only when I came with the Institute and we actually started helping these civilians ourselves, we found out, actually the problem that we are picking up in analysis is not the real root cause problem. it's not the problem that's in the way of a real solution. So I found out the only way to find out what's really preventing innovation and preventing the help of deprived families is by interacting with the system so intensely that you find the root cause. So an example, if you hear from a professional that's not allowed by the law, and you start looking in the law and you see it's not forbidden. So that's not really true that the law is in the way. Okay. Then they're like, yeah, but this person doesn't deserve it because they're being angry and they're shouting at me and they maybe even threatening me. But then you start to look in the law and you're like, yeah, but that's not a reason either because you're not forbidden to help people that are angry. Angry people have rights as well. And then only after the third try you get to hear, yeah, but the problem really is that if I help this person in an integral way, it's going to cost me 8 hours. And in those 8 hours, I can help 10 other people. So I just make this choice between one person or 10 other people, and then I choose for the 10 other people. And then we're like, well, this is the root cause problem, So we have just a management problem of how can we allocate more time for these kind of citizens. So the first analysis we always get from people that just, look on the sideline and it is not really the root cause that you want to fix.
So if I hear what you're saying correctly, then because one of the things I want to start is like, what's the problem we're trying to fix here? And so the problem we're trying to fix is that most bureaucratic systems don't go deep enough to root causes because they're trying to scale generalities. Because one of the challenges you have in government is you're always working at scale, right? So you do that by creating sort of this generality thing, but in the process, a lot of the specifics fall through the cracks. Is that like a fair way of assessing it?
Yeah, so that's a good way to look at it, and also the depth. So just not looking deep enough. They stop at the first no they get, but if you check that no, if you fact check that no, it's actually incorrect. So you need to go a little bit deeper. And maybe the third component is that sectors always look within their own sector for the solution. So Justice Department is always looking for justice interventions to get people back on track, or the care system is always looking for more healthcare to help people get more healthy. But what we see is that the solution actually is more logically found in another sector. So people that are sick, for example, a lot of the times we see is that they have debt, financial debt. So then giving somebody money would be a better solution than giving them more healthcare. So somebody that is stressed and going to the psychiatrist because they're getting crazy about their health debt, their financial debt, are actually not helped with a psychiatrist. They're relieved with a psychiatrist, but they're not actually helped in the root cause. So you want to cross over sectors a lot of the time.
Well, Harry, maybe this is something I'll ask you then is, could you walk us through, so we've kind of danced around this in response to some of the other questions, but what is specifically your process that you do and how does it work?
Yeah, how does it work? When we started out 15 years ago, we would just, for the first time, go to families and ask, we spent 100,000 euros on you, you have 24 people trying to help you, you're not getting any better. What would you want to do or what do you need yourself? And still after 15 years, when we asked that question, half of them burst out in tears and says, nobody ever asked me this question. Nobody ever asked what I need. Just come here and tell me what I should do here and there and what I can get and what I cannot get. And when we try to help them with that, the solutions they came up with were very small. They are always like the first family actually said, I need €1 off my rent because then I'm eligible for rent benefits. And only if I'm eligible for rent benefits, I have €300 more a month, and then I'm eligible for debt relief program. So first what it does is it makes an analysis of the system, which is gone crazy in the Netherlands, because if your rent is too high, you're not eligible for rent benefits. If your income is too low, you're not eligible for debt relief program. So for this family, it's basically she could see where she was going. She was not getting help with the debt. She was not able to pay her rent. Or within 3-4 months, I'm going to be kicked out of my house. My kids are going to go to child protection. That's my problem. So what the method is really trust these people in what is needed in your situation and try to get that little solution through bureaucracy. And at first we thought, this is going to be easy, €1 off rent. But we thought we were very good at it, but when we analyzed it, we had to speak to 22 different people who all said, no, we can't take €1 off the rent. This is not allowed. Otherwise, we have to give everybody €1 off their rent. And they come up with all these arguments, and we try to convince them. And then after 3 months, finally, somebody decided, okay, we're going to get €1 off the rent. And then we helped families like this 30, 40, 50 times. And this is the first step we still do. What do you need? If the breakthrough you say you need is done, what can you do yourself again? What needs a little bit support? Where do you need professional care, and where can you go? What's your perspective in life, and where do you want to go? And people are really relieved already with that first step, because nobody creates that oversight for them. Where do you want to go? What's the breakthrough you need? And how can we, after the breakthrough, rearrange your life? What needs to be prioritized? And they're very happy that for the first time in their life, somebody asked them about the prioritization of all this different help they get, because we do this like with the most vulnerable people. So most of them have benefits, welfare, healthcare, child protection, you name it. They have everything, and nobody asked them about prioritization. Then the breakthrough, we learned it's not very efficient if we go talk to 22 people every time that say no and then 2 yes. So the second part of the method is basically around legitimizing that breakthrough. And at first, we thought we only have to show that there is room for exceptions in the laws and regulations, because we helped over 6,000 people. We never did anything illegal. So there is a lot of room in the rules, but only pointing that out doesn't really help enough. I think one of those first 10 families we helped, the guy wanted his car back. You can't have your car back in debt relief program, but we managed to show that with his car he could bring his kids to school and they didn't have to leave his house. But only showing that there is room to do that in the law is not enough, because there is still also room in the law to say no, he cannot have his car. So the next step we always do is talk money, because when you go too much into law and end up with lawyers and stuff, basically that's a dead end to go. So we always say, please take your law spectacles off for a little bit. Let's look into finance, because most families we help, on average 6,000 people, it's 22,000 euros cheaper off. So all these plans people design for themselves are so logically crafted that it's always cheaper. They always say, if I get this, I don't need this, and this anymore. So then we talk money, and it really helps to get people a little bit out of the law discussion. And then after you discuss money, they mostly go into, okay, it's cheaper as well, but is it really helping these families? So what happens then is these stories of these families, the logic of the families, why they need something, never fits in the logic of the system. The system will always say, we need to be consistent, we can't be arbitrary. And it's what we talked about. And then we say, okay, let's place the logic of this family against that. And just, if they claim they are better involved in their own solution this way, why can't we say yes to the exception? Why do we have to follow the consistency of the system? So then you basically say it's allowed by the rules, it's cheaper, and it's made from the logic of the family's own way of wanting to fix their things. So those three values, the second part of the method. And it really helps to easily or more easily convince people from a no to yes.
So I guess a question. So it makes sense. Anyone who has worked with the welfare system in any country will tell you how it is just a complete mess. And, there's so many different people involved. Like you say, like 20 people involved supporting one family. And it's just not efficient or effective. And you're not getting the results you want. People get sort of stuck in these cycles of poverty. And the people on the other side, like the people who are sort of in need themselves, spend most of their time just trying to figure out how to navigate the system. The logical question that comes to mind for me with this is that this all sounds fantastic. How do you do this at scale? It sounds like a very intensive process. I mean, you're talking you talk to one family, you have to interview them, that takes time, and then you have to basically on their behalf navigate the system, which is a complete mess, and that takes a tons of time. All these different notes like that just it gets you a way better result, but that is a lot of energy in. And as governments, we're always asked to do things at scale. How does this work?
Yeah, good question. That's what we've been wondering for the past 15 years. So the first 5 years, we were just helping these families ourselves, basically with this method and improving on it and adding to it. And then at a certain point, we felt like, we cannot help the 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 families here. We could do that, but it's a way different organization. We have to stop being action researchers, and we just have to be an implementation service. So we always looked at ways to not do that. So then first we started a school on the breakthrough method and training professionals. And then we trained whole municipalities for 500 people. And after half a year, it just was all gone, what we taught. So then that's basically when we came up with the idea. We really have to methodize this. So it has to be an easy way to fill in with a consistent result, something that professionals can do. And we started that, I think, 5 years ago. So now the method is on an app or platform where professionals actually can Google for all the exceptions in the laws we found over the 10 years. So they can just, I want an exception on debt relief or exception here, and they can get those legal exceptions, which will really help them go to the lawman in their municipality. There is a tool to make those cost-benefit analysis really easily for them. So the method is basically our answer to scaling, and now it's used in 100 municipalities in the Netherlands, I think by over 1,000 professionals, and that the scaling really improves itself, because with all the data and all the stuff you get, you can easily improve all the methods, almost up to where we are now, that we can make standardized plans. If you have problem X, Y, Z, we almost certainly know that you need a certain plan or a certain exception.
Yeah, and maybe adding to that is that because you can so clearly show like the causal loop within families and also within groups of families, it's also really easy to inform policy. We've now, because some time has passed already, we've already seen that in certain laws, exception possibilities have been added, different kinds of criteria have been set, different kind of laws are now being implemented because of the lessons we can, we can. It takes some time, but there is a bottom-up working all the way up to the politics. And it's maybe also nice to note, like we talked about, that the time it costs, of course, for a professional to help such a citizen is for that one professional, it costs him or her more time. But if you compare it, like the money side, if you compare it to the time the municipality and the organizations in the whole will be spending on these citizens, it's actually a decrease in time. So, for example, in one municipality, we saw that on average, these citizens cost 30 hours of all these different kind of professionals trying to not help the citizen. And if you condense that to one person, it goes back to 4 hours. So this one person now, instead of half an hour, is taking 4 hours for the family, but actually is saving 26 hours for all the other professionals. And also, of course, time, because sometimes these families have been talking with the government for 2 years, and now we can help them in 3 months. So it really is rearranging the scarce resources that we have. And it's so fragmented now. And if you make that more an integral approach, you really can save a lot of expensive time, money, and material.
I think the thing that's interesting about it for me as well is that because it's just one person and they're spending more time with whoever, that creates the space for more of a bond to form, more trust to form in the system. Although the flip side of it is it's taxing for the person who's putting all that time in. And you can get emotionally invested much more. I think one of the reasons why we've moved to this highly fractured system. One is scale. We thought it would scale more effectively, which I agree it hasn't necessarily done that. But the other one is it sort of allows you to be this sort of dispassionate, this dispassionate public servant who like gives everybody the exact same treatment. Whereas if you're emotionally invested, in many ways you're advocating for a system that like treats every person as unique as opposed to everybody's the same.
Yeah.
And for me, I like it, but it definitely turns things on their head a bit in terms of how
you
think.
And I think that the little bit thing you have to watch out for is that it doesn't become an opinion of a professional if somebody's being helped in a certain way. So that's why what Harry said, we made a method out of it, so that all the decisions that are made are transparent, are reproducible by other people, so that everybody that would get that case would come to the same conclusion, and that you could read back on it and to double check, so that the accountability is also in place, so that government does still help each civilian on the same way, considering all their different situations.
And I think it's an interesting theme that you bring up there, Eric, because it's that's always like we see. The sad thing is, there's a lot of people passionately working on these families without any result, in a sense, and they all truly believe that they do the best they can and work really hard. And part of the problem we realized is if you have 5 people really passionately trying to work your problems, you're basically going to be fucked anyway, because they all 5 have a different method, different belief system, a different task, and we don't discuss that. We all say, no, the family that's the center point, but they never really talk to each other, as we have different opinions on what is good for this family. And basically our only method to break through that, all the different professionals with different questions to the family, is let the family decide for themselves what they want. And nobody realized that that's basically never been done. Ask them what they should do and trust in that. And when we started out, we would say, no, we cannot be passionate. We should just ask them what they want and go into bureaucracy and make that stand. Don't get too passionate. Don't spend too much time with them. Just see if it works. And of course, by doing that, we learned, if you get the confidence that you can do everything in the bureaucratic system that you need, then you become way more human in asking people, what do you actually need? I can make it happen. If you have that trust, you become a way better person to talk to than professionals who already know, shit, please let them not ask for a new house. Please let them not ask, we need a new house. Yeah, then if you don't have the confidence that you're able to get them a new house, then it becomes a very strange conversation.
Well, I guess that the question that comes is like, where does that confidence come from? Because the flip side of that is, how do you manage expectations?
By doing it over and over again. And most projects we started, we already made the deals with the alderman and the people in charge that there will be some questions we're going to ask you, and you have to say yes. You cannot say no, because we deal with these families. And when we come up to you, we ask you to say yes. And then most clever managers and aldermen will say, okay, but please try to route it through the system. I want to know if your method really works. Don't come every time directly to me. So that's a bit of a trust how you build in teaching organizations to do this. Like, you can't just go upstream immediately, but only when it is really needed, we would do that. So slowly but surely we learned to convince people. And I think next to when we started, we really wanted to help these families, but we also kind of just like the game, like to beat bureaucracy at its own game, going into the rules, being sure you know the law better than the people who say they know it, knowing everything about cost-benefit analysis, knowing everything about these people. So it's basically fun to beat bureaucracy. And bureaucracy has the tendency that they only want to reflect on themselves after they've been beaten. So we've seen it, if you help one family to say, it's just one family, but after we beat them 10 times, then they start, okay, now we want to reflect with you guys. What do you do? How do you beat us, basically? And so, we have a lot of fun in doing that, basically.
It's interesting. So talking to both of you about this, it right away brings to mind the work of Hillary Cotton. Yeah, the Radical Help book. I read that last fall, and it really stuck with me. I mean, one of my takeaways with that is it's all about relationships. She takes a very relational approach to this, which it sounds like your approach has some parallels to as well. I mean, I think a lot of the solutions that she ended up focusing on was building better social supports around people who are on welfare. Whereas in your case, maybe it's social supports, but in some ways it's in some ways oftentimes much more practical. I need $1 off of my rent. I need, access to housing.
Yeah.
I'm depressed. I'm thinking about committing suicide. I need a dog, a trained dog to help me, but I won't get it from the care insurance.
Yeah.
And then arrange that she can get a dog.
And I think at end of the day, it probably ends up being the same. But we learned like 85% of the people ask for more money, debt relief, or housing. It's basically what we say, Maslow, the bottom of the pyramid. We just chuck that out of our health, out of the welfare state, basically. We're all about improving people and training people and just the basic ingredients. Enough money to live from, a safe space to live in. And the moment you help them taking care of all the bureaucratic mess that they're in daily, then they have the headspace to do other stuff themselves again. Talk to their neighbors, find social contacts or whatever. But they are so absolved by the stress of the money and the dealing with the system all day. If you take that away, they're literally, you can see the headspace going into social relations again and being more human in a sense.
So I want to play devil's advocate on this a little bit, just to stir the pot. A lot of the concern about the welfare system in places like Canada and the UK, which I know best, is that the majority of people who use welfare use it for a short period of time. They're in, they're out. But then there's this one group that is a small number that is the vast majority of where the resources go. And they get stuck in these cycles. And it's usually really complex cases where there's lots of interdependencies that cause them to be stuck. It's not one thing. It's usually a cascade of things. One of the fears is that you end up with, in psychology, we call it like social loafing phenomenon, where like people lose the motivation to get themselves out of the situation they're in, and as a result, they become dependent upon the state. And so there's a lot of push. One of the reasons why more welfare oftentimes gets loaded with all these kind of rules is to stop people from social loafing and to nudge them towards action. How does your approach take that into consideration? If that makes
Yeah, it sure does. And it's interesting. I think Harry can say something about the effect of that the system, how it's working now, actually is not making people go back to work at all. So the way we're doing it now is not helping, nudging people to it does not work. And quite recently, I did a research on an initiative in the Netherlands who actually took the most long-time social benefit takers in there. And these were people, that would be 10 years to 20 years already on social benefits. And what I found staggering is that the assumption that a lot of policymakers have is that they are not motivated to work was just incorrect. These people were all motivated to work in some way or another that, of course, fit their situation. You must imagine these are people that were sleeping during the day, awake at night, and only had contact for the past year with one person, namely their daughter. And, getting these people back to participate is a big quest. But within 2 years, I saw that so many of these people were, with this initiative, were able just, to, first they start off just attending, and then they started helping each other, pour in coffee and tea for the group volunteers, and then they start helping in the neighborhood, and then they organize a bingo night. And then these people say, well, actually, I really like manicure. And then the organizer said, well, why don't we start a manicuring division within our initiative? Or this other guy said, yeah, I'd really like bicycles. Well, why don't you start repairing bicycles for people in the neighborhood? So they just started these really small entrepreneurial projects within the initiative. What we saw is, of course, so these people have been dependent on benefits quite some time. But we saw that even though it wasn't the goal to get them out to a formal job, 7.7% did. And just alone looking at the financial cost benefit, getting these 7.7% people into a job, even though it was not the goal of the initiative, actually accounted for all the costs that the initiative was costing. So the assumption that people don't want to work, I think, is false. I think what is, at least in the Netherlands, what we do see is that the insecurity to work is much higher than staying in social benefits. So they want to work, but when they work, they're so dependent on all these different benefit forms that it's so complex to mind boggle about what you're actually at the end of the month going to get on your paycheck, that they say, I'm going to either get worse in a financial situation, or it's going to be so fluctuating that I'm going to get in a problem anyway. So, for example, we see these households that at the end of the year, they get this tax letter that says you have to pay back us 2,000 euros. And these are people that live off, 100 euros a week. They can't pay that back, so that they get into debt again. Or, for example, that they start to work, but they're on this 0-hour contract. So then, of course, the Amazon distribution center where they work, they say after 2 months, we don't need you. So they get back into benefits. But then it takes another 1.5 months before they're actually admitted again. And then 1.5 months they don't have an income. So they build up a 1.5 month of debt. So now they wanted to make the step, but actually they end up with more debt and more insecurity than they started out with. So what we're seeing now in the Netherlands is that we really have to make the step into working a form of security as well. So how can we guarantee the basics?
That's only when it comes down to a job or what. But I find it absolutely fascinating how strong the dependency theory is in all our policies, and it's the one policy belief that I haven't seen any good research throughout the past 50 years on why they get dependent on the state or not, and whether it has to do anything about motivation. We don't research it. It's a political idea.
Yeah, we just assume
go
that
for it.
It's
And
internal
I
motivation.
can trace it, at least in the Netherlands, back. Of course, we built the welfare state outside the Second World War up until 1984 was like the top of the Dutch welfare state. 40% of all people in the workforce had some sort of benefit. That's when we realized, okay, maybe we have to make people a little less dependent. So we started to make tougher policies, etc. And then it went back from 40% to 25% in 2000. But it's at that same level since 2000 to 2025. 25 years, it's quite stable. We can't get any more people to work or stay out of benefits. But we keep, based on the dependency, we keep adding to the rules and trying to force more people out. And the same we do with all sorts of care arrangements. So the dependency theory basically puts everybody on edge. We say if we give them a little less than they need, then they pop out themselves. The moment you don't pop out yourself, those are the families we help. You deteriorate. So we would go back and say, let's invest in these people. Instead of going with the theory, if we give them a little less, they will make it work themselves. No, we really should add a little bit to it. But we also notice in Dutch culture, it's if we give a family 300 euros less than they need, nobody cares. If we try to give them 10 euros more than they allowed to get, everybody is on edge. So it's a really strange phenomenon. If you want to give people a little bit extra, then everybody, we can't do this. And well, we showed in 6,000 cases that it really helps if you give them a little bit extra to save and other stuff. You just have to put different priorities in how to motivate them again.
So a question I have is, we've talked a lot about the successes of the approach that you've developed. I kind of want to dive into any failures or learning moments. Like as you've developed, because this has been a development process, as you've been developing this process, this methodologies, what has not worked and what did you learn from that?
I think there's a lot of things that haven't worked. Even if you look at, but I think that the nice thing of action research is that you just keep on trying until it works. So make it really practical. We had this girl and she was homeless and she really wanted to, get a home and start her life again. She was young, so she wanted to go to college first. And nowadays you have to have a laptop if you need that. So then we would give her a laptop, 300 euros, go buy a laptop. And then the next week it would be on internet. She sold it because she was also, addicted maybe to drugs. And so she used it for the wrong things. And so we tried it again. We gave her the laptop again. So we now spend 600 euros. And she still sold it. And only after the third time, she actually kept the laptop and started her school. So what we figure out is how persistent can you be in actually trying to figure out what's a way to go. And I think that is also the thing we're experiencing within the bigger trajectories we're trying to do is, okay, it's not working, but why isn't it working? And how can we understand the system even more and more and more to get to the next step? So, for example, we've been talking about getting the basics on level, like the bare minimum that what Harry was talking about. And now I think only 10 years later, we actually see it back in national policy. So you could say that the first 6 years, 7 years maybe weren't going as well as we were trying to do. But for example, 3 years ago during Corona, we had this big chance to scale up this breakthrough method. And we had the national investment that really helped the local municipalities to incorporate this method. And actually on all levels, the signs were on green. It's more cheap, it's better for the civilian, it's within the law. And even the municipalities don't have to pay because, the government is paid. And we only said, well, try this for a year. And then, you can do it yourself afterwards. And then we can arrange, a deal how we can do this financially. But even that step they didn't want to do. So we had this really big assumption that if we scale it up, technically it's a done deal. Then 10,000 professionals can work on this. If they each do 10 cases a year, what I think is really small, then we have 100,000, cases we fixed. So I think that would be a really nice example that we were saying, okay, how do we now actually scale it to a bigger level? And that is more than only just having a tool and more just than only having, some seed money to build it out. Would you like to add?
Yeah, I think we also, like most of the failures we had is in, as I said, we really like to beat bureaucracy, but you never know when bureaucracy is going to hit back. So we had a couple of instances where you help somebody get a breakthrough, but you have to piss off so many people in the system to talk them from a no to a yes, or if they say no, you go to their boss and say, I need a yes. It's not nice for people working their ass off all day. We believe still, if a family needs it, we don't care if people get pissed off. These families really need it and deserve it. But yeah, it happens sometimes, like we get them the breakthrough. They make a mistake again, and then the system kind of gets vindictive against them. It's a big word, but they will take it away again and say, look, we got you this breakthrough and now you make the wrong choice again. So that's when we learned from those mistakes. We have to add to every plan. These people might fuck it up this year. We don't know why, but there is still stress. There is still a very big chance that they make a mistake. Please don't get vindictive on their asses.
But how do you build that political will? I think a lot of people I know who work in the system be like, yeah, I'd love this, but the fact that you were able to, buy that same laptop 3 times, I that will never happen where I am because I don't have the political will for that. They'd be like, you're just throwing money away. Or how do you build the political will to get this stuff done?
Yeah, so because, for example, this was a homeless girl. So a homeless girl that's in the shelter. What does that cost? I think $30,000 euros for 6 months. Depends a little bit on what kind of help she's getting, what kind of care she's getting with it. So if we can get her out of the shelter, then 3 times 300 euros, 900 euros, less than 1,000 is nothing. The business case is still positive. So that's really interesting.
The homeless shelter is 37,000 euros a year. Part of the political will is always on these cost-benefit analysis. We have a lot of times where we have to tell older men, they will say, no, we can't do debt relief, the public will never allow that. And then we will say, okay, then you have to tell to the public that this lady is costing you 40, 50, 60,000 euros a year because you're unwilling to spend 1,000 euro on a laptop. That really helps. And also the fact that it's a method. So I saw Friso explain this case to people at the tax office who were also like, no way I'm ever going to buy a third laptop. And Friso explained to them, well, in the third time, her circumstances were exactly the same. So based on our method, I could easily give her a third laptop. And then you see, especially with tax people, that I had respect for Friso because he used the method. He was consistent in what he would do and why he would give the laptop. So that's also important to beat bureaucracy at its own game, to always make sure it's not arbitrary. It's based on a method, so there is consistency in why you would do something.
I have so many more questions, but I'm also keeping an eye on the time. I think we're basically at time now.
We can always do a second episode.
Yeah, I know, because I'm like, I want to dig into this more. Like, but where's the line? Like, is it 4 laptops? Is it 5 laptops? Like, where do you draw the line on these things?
Well, there is a line, for example, maybe just to close on that. So of course, we see a lot of civilians that have big problems that really are in need. But sometimes, for example, if they're not committed to their own plan. For example, I had a girl, she was addicted to drugs and was also homeless. And in the process, we were talking, of course, you cannot stop your addiction in one go, but there has to be some kind of commitment in the plan to go from addiction to a better life. And that means first starting with housing and afterwards talking about, rehabilitation. So in the plan, always the first question we ask when we look at what's next is, what do you want to do yourself? And for some person it is, I'm going to go apply for a job. And for another person is, for the first time in my life, I'm going to open my letters with all my the debt emails I'm getting. So that changes. But if a civilian says he will, for example, open the letters, but doesn't do that, and after 2 or 3 times doesn't show they want to learn from their own commitment to their own plan, so their own part of it, then we have a discussion about, is this something we still want to continue? So if a civilian is not committed to their own actions, then we have to have a different conversation. And if we see that, for example, it only happens, I think, in 5% of the times, but that the plan actually in the breakthrough version is more expensive than in the current situation, then we really check, is it really adhering to what we want policy-wise, and is it adhering to that the civilian is becoming more autonomous? And if it's yes, then of course. But if it's on all 3 skills, no. So it's actually dodgy on the legitimacy. If it's dodgy on the euros, and if it's really dodgy on the commitment of the civilian, then we say no.
That makes sense.
And I think the line, unfortunately, is before we draw the line, it's with people themselves. Mm-hmm. They will decide, shit, I sold 3 laptops, I'm not going to ask them again. So they are, that's part of what we see, and it's quite tragic. People stop asking. They will not disappoint the system or the people working in it. So at a certain point, they just stop asking. And they think, it's my mess, I have to clean this up. Yeah, we hardly ever get in those situations, unfortunately, but we lose contact. Before we can draw a line.
So final very quick thing, as we're in overtime, how can people get more information?
Good question. As of July 6, 7, somewhere there, we will have an English website. We are getting up to speed doing that. So now everything is in Dutch at publiekewaarden.nl. You will probably get it in the notes, and we'll send a link for the English website as well, with all the information you need.
And I should say, Google Translate does a decent job of translating your page as well. So I was reading it this morning in Google Translate English, and it made sense. I got it.
Cool. Yeah.
Good to hear.
The new website will be at bestbureaucrats.com.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for making time. I will include those links in the notes to this video. Other than that, happy Monday, everyone.
Yeah,
you too.
You too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.